that, how where does that 199 sort of annual output arrive from?
I mean, again, the council has just used a kind of mathematical approach to, phasing. We don't have detailed indicative capacities for phasing beyond the first two plots. So we've simply taken the remainder of the uplift and then applied a kind of, mathematical kind of approach to it.
Yeah, I was just mindful of the comments that the shopping centre element would come forward later, and the degree to which those units could come forward, in 29-30 onwards, potentially Landsec can help me out with that.
I should say, if it helps, as part of the note you've asked us to look at with the council, we can sort of review the figures and provide a sort of a comprehensive phasing and year by year kind of numbers.
I think that would be helpful. Thank you. Lewisham House.
Thank you, Madam. Just very briefly, I've already made these points, so I just want to make sure that I've made them clearly. We're obviously not suggesting that the site allocation isn't deliverable, but for the reasons we've mentioned around the need for a CPO, we don't agree that the master plan scheme is deliverable, but that's not the question before you. I appreciate that. I just want to make our position clear. We would submit that any note around the timings in relation to the shopping centre ought to reflect a likelihood that there will need to be the exercise of compulsory purchase powers. And the other point is that if the council is going to continue to seek a requirement to master plan the entirety of the site allocation with the various landowners working in partnership, then that hasn't happened, and that will need to happen, and that should be factored into the timescales as well. But the basic point which I made at the outset is that we say we have an alternative which would deliver far earlier than Landsec would be able to deliver Lewisham House under their scheme.
And from your perspective, how would you foresee the Lewisham House aspect of the site coming forward?
I'm just going to ask Mr. Benham, who's about to sit down, to answer you on that one, Madam.
Sorry, the question was the timescales for delivering. Yeah, so we are about to have a further pre-application discussion. Now we will be getting into a PPA process, as gentleman from Landsec described. We would expect to be submitting our application probably towards the end of this year or start of next. I mean, realistically, I would love our application to be dealt with as quickly as was suggested by our colleagues at Landsec there. I think they're pretty ambitious, but our scheme, I think realistically, is likely to take more like 6 to 9 months to get to planning committee, and then a further probably 6 months or so to deal with a Section 106 agreement. Just sort of responding to what Landsec said, I mean, I'm amazed to hear that such an extensive development proposal would be dealt with in 6 months. Notwithstanding, it would have to then go through the GLA process. As we understand it, it's not a fast track application. So the GLA would certainly be scrutinising the viability of that scheme, taking its time to consider the affordable housing proposals. Those things take a long time. And only then would it get back to the Section 106 stage 2 and then be dealt with. So, I mean, realistically, that looks to me to be more like a 2-year before you've even got a consent in your hand from the date of an application. I'd say we'd be probably through the process within 18 months for our scheme.
So in terms of output, in terms of housing figures per annum, what do you foresee in terms of the trajectory?
Well, ours is slightly fluctuating at the minute, but we're proposing, I think, 350 co-living units-ish. which equates back to about 200 C3 units.
In terms of when those are actually going to appear on site.
Well, we're saying probably within 3 to 5 years. Well, I think it's actually 4 years is what we're really targeting, but allow a bit of a buffer, but we'll be on site and delivered and occupying them within the first 5 years of the plan.
When actually starting on site? When would that actually be output?
Let's say 2 years from now to allow time for some conditions to be discharged. So that's 2026 we would start on site. So I guess you'd have occupation around 2028, if I've done my sort of maths right.
Okay, thank you. And from the council's perspective, the housing trajectory seems to be mainly based on the Landsec scheme coming forward. Where does the council see the Lewisham House scheme in terms of the housing trajectory? You know, how does it see that fitting into the housing trajectory? Where's that accounted for?
Well, I think the council was just reflecting on the fact that the property has remained vacant despite 2 prior approvals unimplemented. So we were taking a cautious approach to the redevelopment or the refurbishment of that site. There's been no as far as I'm aware, until very recently, there's been no proactive approach to the council to effectively deliver this site. So again, looking at that cautious approach, and I have to say, again, trying to undermine the kind of 5-year land supply by saying that land securities can't deliver within a 5-year period, and then effectively saying that Lewisham House can be. There is no evidence to support that, as far as I can see, being submitted to the examination. So this is effectively just kind of hearsay. We have got and had schemes which have been submitted and approved and built within a 5-year period. And, you know, given where we are with our housing numbers, given the kind of drive from a new government of creating 1.5 million homes, you know, we would effectively say that development partners do need to get on with building. And this is obviously a recurring theme that we've had. You know,
I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think just to you know, to answer the question in terms of where you see Lewisham House appearing in the housing trajectory as part of the overall picture.
We had it beyond the 5-year period, but we haven't really specifically identified where that would be delivered.
I mean, I think it would be useful from our perspective to understand, obviously, the site. So town centre, the shopping centre site as a whole, but obviously there are component parts of that, and it would be useful to see, you know, how those figures have been arrived at, which we've obviously asked you to look at. But if you could factor in where you see the Lewisham House site coming forward as well, because it does impact in terms of the how realistic the trajectory is.
We can certainly do that and have a look with land securities. What I would say is that there are sites where we don't necessarily have an advanced pre-app coming forward, and we don't know the phasing of that particular site, which will again be developed through the development management process, and therefore in terms of trying to come up with you know, a trajectory that reflects the capacity, we have had to by necessity make professional assumptions and judgment on how these sites will be phased and delivered. So there are sites which are not underpinned by, you know, a detailed phasing strategy as of yet, where the council has essentially just made some assumptions.
You've heard from Lewisham House in terms of their timescales for delivery, and I come back to the fact it's the council's plan and it's council's trajectory. So having heard what Lewisham House have said about their potential plans for bringing the site forward, the council might be in a better position to make the judgment in terms of where their site sits within the housing trajectory. And I appreciate it will be a judgment.
Yes, of course. I mean, I think it's difficult. The council is in a difficult position here because essentially, with the principal landowner effectively providing, a legal position saying that the Lewisham House cannot be delivered separately, and Lewisham House not responding to that evidence. The council's in a position where it doesn't have the evidence to suggest that the Lewisham House can be delivered within the 5-year period. At the present, we don't have any evidence to suggest that.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think from our perspective, though, we need to know where the council anticipates that site coming forward, and it would be helpful to know where, have that breakdown between the two sort of sites and where the council sees that sees both sites coming forward in the trajectory. It is the council's plan. The council envisages Lewisham House coming forward within the planned period. Presumably, it forms part of the council's housing provision and housing trajectory. So we need to be clear at what point you see that coming forward and why the reasoning for that in the trajectory. Because obviously we need to be very clear that the plan's deliverable. So I hear what you're saying. The council will have to form a judgment, but it would be useful to see where you see that within the overarching figure for that particular site.
Yeah, we can take that away. I mean, both participants are saying that the sites are deliverable within the planned period. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's just a case of how that site is delivered. And I think, again, just to, I appreciate the point and we'll take that away, but it's very difficult for the council. What we've assumed at the moment is that it's not within the 5-year period because we have no evidence that it can be delivered within the 5-year period. Now, if it can be delivered and there is evidence that it can be delivered within the 5-year period, then we can add it to the 5-year land supply. At the moment, what we've done is essentially said it is a developable site within the planned period, and that is agreed by both parties. And somewhere along that trajectory between years 6 and years 10, that site will be delivered. But again, that very much depends on the delivery mechanism and what we might have to do in terms of, can it be developed by Lewisham House? Does it require a CPO, etc.? So it's quite complex.
So you're saying potentially between years 6 and 10, because it's not that, I think it's because it's all lumped together as one site. It's not clear, but from hearing the discussions today, I think there are issues which may affect the delivery of the component sites. So it'd just be useful to have that breakdown. Thank you. I think we've covered the questions I had. I am conscious that there are a series of development requirements and guidelines. Having had a look through them, I don't have any particular issues with those. They do make sense in the context of a large town centre regeneration scheme. But if there are any particular points in relation to the development requirements or guidelines that you wish to make, is your nameplate up as a legacy or did have a final
I
point.
did just want to briefly respond to the council's point around deliverability of Lewisham House, which was your previous question, madam. I mean, there was a reference to legal advice provided by Landsec. That's not in front of the examination, and I am a bit concerned that I'm repeatedly hearing references to Landsec as the principal landowner, having provided all this information, which just underpins our client's concern that this isn't being dealt with in a sort of proactive, let's engage properly as important landowners. I mean, I don't dispute that in terms of floor space or quantum or what have you, Landsec might be the principal landowner, but we have a very important, very long leasehold interest that we remain of the view the council should be, taking more seriously. There's also another point which the council might wish to consider when it's coming back to you on the timescales for delivery of Lewisham House, which is that although our principal intention is to pursue the co-living permission, we would be able, under permitted development rights, with simply a grant of prior approval, to convert the building into C3. So if there were to be any impossibility of bringing forward our co-living scheme for legal reasons, then that is a fallback position which I say the council should be considering. And I think Mr. Benham extremely briefly just wanted to respond on the suggestion that there's something in the fact that the previous prior approvals weren't implemented. So I'll just bring him in.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll keep it very, very quick. So there was I think a prior approval in 2015, which subsequent to that being granted, actually the government approached our client to discuss converting the building to an education facility. That was entertained for quite some time, and then the government pulled out of that, meaning it was too late to actually implement and deliver that scheme. Subsequently, in 2018, a further prior approval application was granted, given approval. And there were various approaches at that time to purchase the building from various parties, which our client was interested in and entertaining. And then obviously COVID came about at the end of 19, start of 20, and in effect prevented them from being able to deliver. But it was too late by that point anyway. And then more recently, in 2021, a further scheme was approved, but actually, again, further interest was shown, and our client was starting to become interested in co-living, other living sector uses, and decided to explore some of those. We've been engaged, as have others on our team, for over a year to consider that sort of land use and how we might bring that about. So there's nothing in this lack of deliverability point. It's not particularly relevant. It's not relevant to our intention to now move forward and get a co-living consent and bring that forward in the short term.
Okay, thank you for that. There are some modifications which we have touched on. There's MO 88, which relates to amended wording in paragraph 14.24, criterion 6, I believe, about working in partnership with Thames Water, engaging with them early to minimise impacts on groundwater, etc. Seems fairly straightforward.
Yes, there are several modifications that relate, I think, firstly to the site which we haven't discussed in detail, LCA SAO1. So modifications under PD11, MO 87 and 88. Again, I apologise, those are duplications. They both deal with paragraph 14.24 brackets 6, and that is in response to a request from Thames Water. Moving on to LCA SAO2, there is modification MO 242, which essentially wraps up the subsequent modifications which are being introduced following the signing of the statements of common ground, and which are themselves covered by MO 277, MO 278 and MO 279, which were passed to you this morning as an addendum to submitted document PD 11. So in order, MO 277 relates to the table on page 462 and seeks to align with the housing trajectory of anticipated delivery, and amends the net residential units from the aforementioned 1579 to 2150. MO 278 seeks amendments to paragraph 14.29, and I think if I deal with the amendments in order as they appear in that paragraph, deletes the words shopping centre and replaces those words with site allocation as a whole. Moving on, the sentence that begins redevelopment will provide opportunities to deliver. There is a deletion of modern retail and employment space with replacement by main town centre floor space. Sorry, that also deletes leisure and cultural community facilities. So main town centre floor space, including retail and employment, leisure and cultural and community facilities. There is a deletion of the words "and secure long-term future of the market." I believe that's a factual position, because the market lies outside of the site, the site allocation, and its future is being secured by other mechanisms. And the introduction of text which explains that, which is: the council have secured £19 million from the Levelling Up Fund, which the council will use to use this funding to carry out works to enhance the market in 2024. Lewisham shopping centre proposals should be considerate of the emerging Lewisham market proposals and complement its offer. Finally, there is a proposed modification under MO 279, and that's at paragraph 14.30 of the supporting text. That introduces new words which are redevelopment and refurbishment. The deletion of the words explored to better integrate them into, and replacement with fully coordinated with, a comprehensive approach to the wider site allocation. Deletion of the word scheme. Those are the modifications for SA02 and, sorry, SA01 and SA02. Thank you.
Obviously, we haven't had a sight of these for very long, so just react to my initial reaction. I think in terms of the reference to the market proposals, the text, the council have secured £19 million from the Levelling Up Fund, which council will use as funding to carry out works to enhance the market in 2024. I think that would be better as supporting text, because it's just explaining the process, really. I think the last sentence, Lewisham's shopping centre proposal should be considerate of the emerging Lewisham market proposal and complement its offer. I think that's fine. I think it's just it's more of a process thing. The reference to the funding, so that might be better in supporting text. Just my initial initial thoughts. Any comments in terms of the modifications?
Thank you, Madam. Very briefly, I'm sure everyone would quite like a sandwich, but I don't think I've got I haven't got the document that the council were just referring to, but that doesn't matter. The reason being that I just wanted to comment on the last modification, which is alternatively set out, as I understand it, at paragraph 5.4 of the statement of common ground between Landsec and the council, where there is a proposed modification from a requirement to explore options for plots, including Lewisham House, into a requirement that that should be fully coordinated with the comprehensive approach to the wider site allocation. I mean, I won't go back over all the points that I made earlier, but what I do see here actually is a discord between development requirement 1, which requires all parties, to work in partnership, and this idea that actually it should be Lewisham House that has to coordinate itself with essentially whatever Landsec wants to do with the rest of the site allocation. That doesn't marry with the sort of more equal approach that one finds in development requirement 1, which doesn't really seem to give a priority as amongst the various landowners and the various interests. Whereas it seems in the modification that the onus is on Lewisham House or any other plots of land to coordinate themselves with the proposals for the rest of the site allocation. So we object to that modification essentially for the same reasons that we object to aspects of the draft site allocation.
Can I ask for the council's response to that, please?
Again, I think we've gone over this, and for the interest of time, I think we'll leave it to the discretion of the inspectors.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure about anybody else, but my stomach is rumbling, so I think it's time for lunch. And I was going to just explore the option of returning 145, just to make sure we get through the remainder of the sites. I did want to to thoroughly test that site because it is a very important and complicated site. But yeah, I just wanted to take soundings on whether a return at 145 is acceptable to everybody. Does anyone object to an early return?
No, we'd welcome that, Mum. Thank you.
Sufficient time for the council. I'm conscious you've been in the hot seat to get lunch and get turned around.
Yeah, that's fine with us. Yeah.
We'll adjourn until 145. Thank you.